Do you believe that movies can inspire actual crimes to happen in real life? Do you think they're responsible?
Well, yeah, because I just wrote this list, so well, half of it at least.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah, no, I'd say there's a pretty solid case right here, right now. Sit back, relax. Maybe don't watch any of these movies if you're easily influenced. Starting off our list today, we have spree killer George Hennard, who on October 16th of 1991 drove his pickup truck through the window of Lubby's Cafeteria in Killeen, Texas, before open firing on patrons of the restaurant, killing 23 people. When police arrived, he entered into a violent standoff with officers. He fired, they fired, and Hennard became badly injured. He was instructed to stand down and promised medical attention for his cooperation, but Hennard refused and instead turned his weapon on himself, taking his own life. For 16 years, the incident was the largest of its kind in modern US history. When the coroner examined Hennard's body, they found something that made the whole thing kind of just click. A ticket stub for the 1991 film The Fisher King. The killings committed by Hennard were incredibly similar to those committed in the film. In The Fisher King, Edwin, much like Hennard, had been having a difficult time connecting to women, and so in a fit of rage, he entered into a popular Manhattan restaurant and, like Hennard, opened fire at patrons of the establishment before taking his own life with the same weapon. While officials were unable to confirm the connection, the uncanny similarities and the fact that Hennard had watched the film multiple times in the days leading up to the attack pretty much speak for themselves.
The Nightmare on Elm Street wasn't just inspired by true events, it also ended up being the inspiration for a true crime as well. In September of 2004, a series of violent crimes were carried out by a man named Daniel Gonzalez. He went on a spree for 2 days, killing 4 and injuring 2 others across London, Sussex. He'd written in letters to himself about how much he enjoyed what he'd done, comparing himself to Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees. He decided he wanted to become a famous serial killer. On September 15th, Gonzalez approached an elderly couple walking their dog. He told the husband he was going to kill him, but the man fought him off. Yes, a 61-year-old man bested a 24-year-old who somehow saw himself as the real-life version of a powerful nightmare demon. Well, Gonzalez had to kill someone that night, so he took the life of a 76-year-old woman named Mary Harding with a kitchen blade. 2 days later, he continued his violent spree, repeatedly impaling a man named Kevin Malloy with 2 long kitchen blades. Then he attempted to kill another man after breaking into his home, but was once again fought off. At 8 a.m. though, he broke into the home of an elderly couple, Derek and Jean Robinson, both of whom he killed. Gonzalez was arrested that very same day. He later tried to plead insanity in court, but was given 6 life sentences instead. He took his own life in 2007, but unlike Freddy Krueger, he's never coming back.
Next up, we have Abner Aquilina. If I'm pronouncing that wrong, I'm sorry, but he's a bad dude. On January 2nd of 2022, he violated and killed 29-year-old Paulina Demsica. During an interrogation, Aquilina likened his life to the 1971 dystopian film Clockwork Orange, saying that it accurately portrayed his upbringing as well as his yearning for violence and religious redemption. But this wasn't the first time the movie had been cited by criminals facing charges. After being charged for killing a homeless man, Richard Palmer likened himself to the movie's protagonist Alex, who took pride in his antisocial and violent behavior. In another instance, a group of men chanted "Singing in the Rain" while violating a young woman, a real-life mirror image of one of the movie's many violent scenes. In 1990, Michael Anderson was found guilty of ending the life of a young woman. Anderson told investigators that at the time of the killing, he had been wearing a Clockwork Orange t-shirt, and that whenever he wore it, he would always do bad things. And Peter Foster was another to draw dangerous inspiration from the film. He would dress up as the film's protagonist Alex and listen to the movie's theme song before committing violent acts on women, 2 of which ended up dead.
The 1994 film Natural Born Killers was supposedly the inspiration for a number of real-life crimes. The most famous, though, is the case of Sarah Edmondson and Benjamin Darras, who sort of mimicked the killer couple of Woody Harrelson and Juliette Lewis in the film. After watching the movie at a cabin, the two loaded up their car, drove out to Mississippi, where the boyfriend killed a cotton mill manager named William Savage by firing twice at his head at point-blank range. They then continued on to Louisiana, where the girlfriend Sarah Edmondson fired at a convenience store clerk named Patsy Byers. She survived, but was severely injured, quadriplegic to this day. Byers later sought legal action against the young couple, along with the director of Natural Born Killers, Oliver Stone, and the Time Warner Company. Now, I don't really think it's fair to blame movies and TV for real-life crimes. I mean, people messed up enough to commit random acts of violence likely would have done something whether the movie existed or not. And if people aren't intelligent enough to get the point of the film, I mean, that's not the filmmaker's problem. Natural Born Killers is a commentary on how the media, especially at that time, kind of made serial killers into these famous figures, covering them and plastering their faces everywhere until they became these kind of sick versions of pop icons. It's just very ironic how this whole thing happened.
Next on our list today, we have spree killer Jonathan Cruz, who, after watching the 2013 horror movie The Purge, decided to end the lives of 3 people in the span of just 4 days. I feel like it was pretty obvious that this movie would end up on the list. I mean, it's literally dedicated to celebrating random acts of lawless violence and inflicting harms on others while actively condemning those who disagree with the practice. Also, it wasn't even good. It got 42 on Rotten Tomatoes. Anyways, Cruz was given 3 consecutive life sentences after pleading guilty to the crimes he claims were inspired by the plotline of the movie. A recovered text message sent from Cruz's cell phone read, "I purge every night now." Marion County prosecutor said in regards to the crime, "As we describe the homicides which are occurring in our city, we frequently sound like a broken record when we describe these killings as senseless. But the killings that have occurred here are beyond senseless," and I absolutely agree with that sentiment.
Next up, we have the case of Mark Branch, who was quite the fan of the Friday the 13th series. In 1988, a young psychology student named Sharon Gregory was studying a young man named Mark Branch in New England. He was seemingly obsessed with Jason Voorhees. He loved gory slasher flicks in general, but not in the same way other horror fans do. People who knew Mark in person said something just seemed off about him, that he liked slasher films in more of a disturbed kind of way. And on October 24th, 1988, he took his obsession too far. While wearing a hockey mask, he brutally attacked Sharon Gregory in her own home, killing her in the bathroom. She was found by her twin sister Cheryl. Branch was nowhere to be found though, and a manhunt was launched. It took police over a month to find him. Their search led them to an abandoned slaughterhouse where Branch had been hiding. He'd drawn a crude picture of Jason Voorhees on the walls, but Mark Branch had taken his own life, hanging himself from a tree.
Next up, we have Mark Twitchell, a Canadian killer and filmmaker, who wanted nothing more than to be just like his biggest role model, Dexter. I would say the main difference between the two was that Dexter was an incredibly intelligent but incredibly disturbed individual who meticulously preyed on dangerous criminals guilty of ending the lives of others, while Mark Twitchell was just an incredibly disturbed man who preyed on innocent men looking for a date. On 2 separate occasions, Twitchell used a fake dating profile on the website Plenty of Fish to lure unsuspecting men to his home in Edmonton. The first man escaped, but the second was not so lucky. Twitchell, who often posed as Dexter on Facebook, lured Johnny Altinger to a rented garage space that he had decked out, albeit poorly, to resemble Dexter's killing lab. Police arrested Twitchell on October 31st of 2008. Pretty fitting. It's Halloween. After evidence connected him to the crime. On his laptop, they found a file entitled SK Confessions. The first line read, "This story is based on true events. The names and events were altered slightly to protect the guilty. This is the story of my progression into becoming a serial killer." And if that's not a written confession, I don't know what is.
Next up, we have Queen of the Damned. You know, That movie you tell the goth girl you like that you've seen even though you've only seen the first 15 minutes of it when you were like 13? Well, yeah, apparently this movie inspired a real-life crime as well, the case of Alan Menzies. So on December 11th, 2002, Alan Menzies killed his best friend. Not only that though, he also drank his BLOOD and part of his head. And he did it because he believed he was gonna become a vampire. He told authorities that one night the vampire queen Akasha from the movie visited him in his dreams, telling him that she'd make him an immortal vampire if he carried out the act. Now, this is a really, just like every case on here, it's awful, for one, but also very strange because unlike a lot of these other cases, this guy wasn't just inspired by something he actually knew was a work of fiction. He actually believed a character in a movie existed, I guess, even though she was played by a pop singer in real life. Somehow he just forgot what movies are. Not only that, but he thought a dream was enough to justify killing his own best friend. I don't know. People never cease to disappoint and baffle me. I have a lot of questions about this case.
I thought Hannah Montana and Miley Cyrus were two different people, so, I'm not cutting the guy slack, but it happens. Next up, we have Nathaniel White's violent crime spree, which he claims was inspired by the 1990 sci-fi action film RoboCop 2. After watching one of the characters in the movie brutalize a woman by cutting across her throat, chest, and stomach, he mirrored the crime in real life, which he later described as being exactly like he saw in the movie. After the initial act, White went on to commit 5 other gruesome killings inspired by the film. In 1991, after killing his first victim, White actually went to prison for a separate crime involving forcibly taking and holding a young woman captive, but he pled down to a misdemeanor and was paroled after 1 year, which of course ended up being heavily criticized by both the public and law enforcement because when he got out, he continued his spree, ending the lives of his 5 other victims, one of which was his girlfriend's niece. He was eventually caught later that year and sentenced to 150 years or life in prison for his crimes.
And finally, we have American Psycho, which has been blamed for a string of real-life crimes. I think out of everything on this list, American Psycho is one I can kind of see maybe inspiring some bad stuff, seeing as the story is actually told from the killer's perspective in this movie. Paul Bernardo, one of the most despicable criminals in Canadian history, referred to American Psycho as his Bible. A young man named Michael Hernandez killed a classmate in 2004, citing Patrick Bateman as inspiration for his crime. Another notorious Canadian killer named Luca Magnotta took the life of his roommate, June Lin, on video while a song from the soundtrack played. And then there's the story of Rurik Jutting, who brutally tormented and killed 2 Indonesian women in his luxury high-rise apartment in Hong Kong. He was also known to be a very big fan of American Psycho, the movie, and the novel. There you have it. Why can't people be more inspired by, superheroes?
Yeah.
Go out and do some good deeds. Even RoboCop. He could have just gone out there and
he picked the wrong guy to emulate.
Shot a bad guy in the nards. That would have been a good RoboCop.
We're not saying to be a vigilante though, because that's obviously illegal. But
become a cop first. I've been your host, James.
I've been your host, Hannah.
And we'll catch you guys in the next movie.